the modern social media user knows that if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. The goal and vision for Blacksky, as you can imagine, it's like subreddits, but if the moderators could pay themselves and if they could actually, figure out whatever rules of the road that they want for their community. Moderation decisions have a outsized impact on the experience of social media users. And ultimately, what happens on centralized services is that people get banned for things and there's really no recourse for them. There's no...
You don't have anyone to talk to. It's like the computer says no.
Hey, Rabble.
Hey, Alice.
So this week's guest is Rudy Fraser, and he is best known for being the creator of Blacksky, which he came to having been organizing real-life events for his community and wanted to create something similar and authentic online. So it'd be great to hear from you how Blacksky came into being and what made it possible.
Rudy is a New York-based organizer and activist and technologist who was very involved with mutual aid groups and the Black Lives Matter protests, and said, as he saw Bluesky get introduced, how do I make this my own? How do I make something that is an algorithm that reflects his own community? And once they got the algorithm created, they're like, what if we had our own moderation system? What if we made a moderation system that was by and for the Black community? And they built that. And then after that, they're like, well, what if we really own our means of communication? And so they have built an entire stack of communication that is compatible with Bluesky, exists inside the Bluesky ecosystem, but doesn't have to run on the Bluesky server. So they're no longer dependent on anything that the Bluesky people do. They've built an entire stack themselves, and it's all open source, and it's really impressive around community-controlled self-governance, and not just addressing the issues of how does the technology work, but Rudy's roots are in community finance and community fundraising and susus, which are these saving circles that come out of the Caribbean. And so we talk a lot about what is mutual aid? How do we build a commons? How do we build a community created social media ecosystem that is able to address the financial incentives, able to raise the money to pay the moderators, raise the money to pay the creators, and fund it internally from the community rather than selling our attention to advertisers. And it's a fascinating discussion because Rudy is an example of the best of what is possible in this social media protocol future.
Absolutely. And of course, none of that would be possible on any of those big corporate-owned platforms that we are so used to living on up until now. So let's take a listen.
I'm very excited to have Rudy Fraser on the podcast. Rudy is someone who has come up many times in my past episodes, someone that many people in the community admire, who has been founding Blacksky Algorithms, built the Blacksky community, and has been building the RSky project, which is an attempt to build an entire technology stack compatible with Bluesky on the protocol with autonomous community created and driven technology. And these things are so important because Rudy is doing the work of making his community be able to control his own means of communication. And so I am just so happy to have you on here. I'm so happy to talk to you about what you're doing and the vision, and also get into some of the things you did before working on Blacksky, because the mutual aid groups and the Paper Tree community fundraising projects are also super fascinating, and they're not disconnected. So welcome, Rudy.
Yeah, no, thank you. I really appreciate you inviting me on the podcast. I was just thinking right before I got on here, like, damn, this is the same, to be on the same platform with folks who are like, like obviously speaking with you, the same platform you had Jack Dorsey on and Cory Doctorow, all these people who are like the big names in the social media space and ecosystem. And sometimes I speak with folks and they're kind of like, they're a little shocked that they think that I know about all these other Like they're like, oh, did you investigate this protocol versus this protocol? And I was like, I just kind of started with that protocol. It's kind of just where, like you mentioned, there was other stuff I had going on before that. But so it's been a wild ride so far, and I feel like we're just getting started.
Yeah, it's funny that the asking about the different protocols. Today I was talking to some folks about all these different protocols and the way they worked and trade-offs and whatnot. And for many years, I kept an Airtable database of every social media protocol. And I would like throw that database at people every time they said they invented a new protocol. I'm like, either use something that has community traction, like has figured it out and has built something that is being used and works, like you did with the app protocol, or learn all of the prior art about what was going on so you're not reinventing the wheel. The work that you've done on the app protocol, which is the protocol behind Bluesky, is super interesting. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you got involved, what you did first, sort of some of that sort of history of going from a user to a pretty core developer in this ecosystem.
Yeah, I would say I came into it trying to be a developer. So I was, like you kind of alluded to, I had no prior experience in the social media space. Before working on Blacksky, I actually found out about Blacksky because I was working on this project called Papertree, which I was trying to create as a community bank account for the neighborhood of Bed-Stuy. And long story short, the bank account got shut down, not related to our operations. Something kind of out of our control. But then when we tried to get a new bank account, that was denied because of our operations. It was like, you can't hold money for other people. Like, that's against the rules. And so while we were trying to figure that out, I had put Papertree on hiatus for a little bit. And I was like, hey, what, I still want to work and hack on this kind of community kind of thing. Because for me, my years in the tech industry was as a Salesforce or enterprise IT architect. And I was, the company I was at, they had an exit and I had some runway. And so I was like, I'm going to, I always wanted to found my own thing. So that was my time to do that. And I tried doing it the typical startup advice way that they tell you to do things. And it just wasn't fitting for me. It wasn't clicking. It wasn't working. It didn't feel right. And so I decided that I wanted to create, instead of looking for a market to capture, I wanted to create something that felt like it could be my life's work. It could be the thing that I spend, 10 years working on. And win, lose, or draw, I would feel accomplished and like my spirit would be at ease at the end of that journey. And for me, I started made me reflect on who I was. And for me, community is at the center of everything that I do, have done, have succeeded at. I feel like I understand community in ways that other people don't. I think community has been kind of the same way folks took woke and turned that into something completely different. I feel like folks have taken community and turned that into something synonymous with a demographic. And for me, community really means like mutual accountability between the one and the many.
It's a living, breathing thing. It's not a classification.
Yeah, it's like, an organism that has its own properties. Once you get a group of people together and they start working together, that is its own kind of entity. And so for me, I was like, how can I kind of live that out in technology form? And I did look at tangible problems. For me, it was like, I feel like we talk in the tech industry about solving hard problems all the time, but I don't know that, the biggest well-funded or successful startups are solving hard problems. Because I think it turns out when the problem's too hard, that's like, okay, like world hunger, that's too much of a challenge to solve in a 5-year VC timeline, And so, but, food insecurity was a thing that I was really passionate about. And so I approached it from the standpoint of like, hey, the George Floyd uprisings were a big radicalization moment for me in 2020. I was outside very frequently organizing with folks. And through that, you could see glimpses of a different kind of world. Like the city felt like, for me, my whole world changed around that. I don't think we talk enough about how much 2020 changed a lot of things, you know? Yeah, like ramifications to this day. The whole mutual aid movement in New York really started out of 2020. Like all the orgs, I'm now the board chair of a nonprofit called PAC Collective that fiscally hosts about 15 mutual aid groups, and they all started in 2020. But in 2020, while I was out marching with folks, you know, I saw these fridges. And I was like, oh, like, and it said like, share what you can, take what you need. And I just became very fascinated with that. I was like, hey, it's been a couple years now. Why aren't those everywhere? Like, I should, like, this seems like such a great idea. I had encountered food insecurity all my life, pretty much, you know? And so I was like, this is remarkable that people are, you know, that this can exist. And so then I was like, well, I started looking into it and like, what was preventing it from happening? I found out it was mutual aid groups that was doing this. Oh, it was, what is mutual aid? Like, how do these organizations, I got really fascinated with how the organizations work. And I ended up joining a couple and noticing some of these challenges. And so like getting really obsessed with the dynamics of community organizing was like a lot of the origins.
I was in Portland, Oregon in 2020, and part of the mutual aid groups and part of the Black Lives Matter protests there. And my direct work was getting together the speakers so that we had speakers and music and things like that that could work on all of these things. But the thing that really blew my mind was the way in which we were able to raise money, the ways in which we were able to mobilize with social media, the way in which we would amplify the grassroots organizing and meeting people's needs on the street with a larger world of support. You know, there was a Black family that was being evicted from their home in Portland due to mortgage fraud from the mortgage broker's side. And we had this occupation outside and to prevent the immediate eviction. But then we were able to crowdfund all of the money to buy back the house and give it to this family. We weren't just we were doing mutual aid groups. We were providing food and we were providing housing and we were providing media and medical support and speakers. But we also had this digital side, the live streaming side, the community building side, and the fundraising side that I had never really seen before. And that, at least for me, really inspired me. I'm like, oh, there's, something more powerful here.
Yeah. Hey, like, I feel like I could write a book on all of my thoughts on mutual aid because, like, it's really like there's things that you go into it thinking like how organizing will be. And then there's like one of the constant shocks that I had is that like my expertise as like an executive at a corporation was actually really helpful in organizing because you're organizing with folks who are like, that was really the inspiration for Paper Tree. I got into this group. There was, like 10 of us, there was an $80,000 in the bank account and we were trying to figure out, do we pay somebody's rent or not? And just that decision-making process, it's kind of, it's not life or death, but it's like up there, it's like, will this person be housed?
It has a huge impact on people's lives.
Yeah. And psychologically, it's like taxing decision to make with some people doing this in their spare time, but want to make the right decision, like, having good intentions. So Paper Tree kind of came out of that of like, well, I feel like there shouldn't be just this like this working group within this group that's helping this outside, the person who is impacted by the problem does not get a say in the decision making bothered me essentially. And so like I wanted to create something a little bit more open, and that's how Paper Tree started. But even in that process going through with organizing, I ended up finding a group called We the People NYC, and they're a group that I'm a lead organizer with now. Bushwick United Mutual is another group that I organized with, and that was where I saw like, oh, there's groups that have GitHub repos. There's groups doing like automation with Airtable. That's how I found out about Open Collective. It wasn't through like, I think Open Collective started as like they were going to work with
just open source projects.
Yeah, just open source projects. And then they kind of happened upon this, like, once the mutual aid group started blowing up, they had a similar need of like, being an unincorporated entity, but needing a fiscal sponsor, someone to hold the money and get tax deductible donations. So like the operations to feed hundreds of people, like coordinating that, like in a decentralized manner, like it's just, to this day, it just fills my heart with like the vision of a future that people often say is like not possible through these like collective means. I see it every week, you know, in all these different groups. And so I just wanted to like, in some of this organizing, you find folks that are not very receptive to technology. There's a little bit of pushback. You know, I think they're usually like against big tech, capital T technology. Because reasonably, no one's against technology, lowercase. Like people use cars, they have phones, like, you know what I'm saying? The
technology that seems ubiquitous, that's just part of your daily life and isn't something new. You don't object to, you don't think about it. It's the thing that changes those routines.
Yeah. Or you feel like it's like manipulating you or extracting from you.
Alienated technology. I mean, so in mutual aid organizations, you're working to have a human community controlled, member controlled, democratic network to solve society's needs. And it's messy, but like society is messy, but we have models now for how to do that. And you face this issue where you had two sets of problems that I've sort of interpreted. One was the banking system and the way in which there's like your kind of organization, your structure, the way you handle money, who has it, how it's decided. It doesn't fit with our regulations and our understanding of how things should work. Therefore, we don't want to give you a bank account. And then the other is you're communicating and organizing on social media platforms. You're organizing on Twitter and on Instagram and everything else. And those platforms aren't built for community control. They aren't built, even if they started out as community, they don't stay that way. They end up like algorithms that advertise for engagement, they're algorithms for advertising consumption. So I'm wondering if you could talk about this, the way in which you went from just the financial community organizing mutual aid stuff to, we can take these ideas of a community controlled ecosystem and use it to solve the issues you had coming out of social media.
Yeah, big question. I mean, I think to this day, I read a lot. I've read over like 50 something books this year. And I'm always trying to like read things that I feel like deepen my like theory and philosophy on technology, organizing, Blackness as a concept and as a construct in society. And like one of the first things that I read about mutual aid was a article by Tressie McMillan Cottom in the New York Times. I think it was something that's better than charity. Like it was like mutual aid is better than charity, and it was speaking about mutual aid in a way that I understood, that I still use as my framework for mutual aid. You know, like I've read Kropotkin, and like like mutual aid is like an evolutionary theory and stuff. But the mutual aid that I understand is like the kind of like, and when folks talk about the anarchism of Blackness, is like the kind of upbringing that I had, where it was like, it's like a natural survival tactic. It's not a thing that you need to be taught. It's like the way you literally survive on a day to day is through the networks that you have in your neighborhood. And so for me, it's just like, I feel like what I saw is that in like my current day, we are disconnected. You know, you can be in an apartment building and be very disconnected from people. But the thing that connects people, even if you grew up with them, the thing that connects folks a lot is like social media. And
it's how we connect now.
Yeah. You know, as much as people sometimes they say they hate it, I think they hate the virality. I think there's aspects of it they hate, but as a communication mechanism, as like a replacement for, and especially depending on what you call social media, I say like YouTube is social media, WhatsApp is social media, Signal is social media, your group chat is social media. It's not a public timeline. You know, social media didn't even start with a public timeline or algorithmic timeline. So like but like looking at it from that lens, and then Tressie in her article, she talked about a mutual aid group can be a group of neighbors. It can also be a social media group. And so I'd always had it in my head like, oh, this is like, because what we encountered with Papertree was that we were having problems finding the groups that, there's mutual aid groups, but they don't necessarily have like a fully democratic process. There's the DAO and crypto world. Again, I found out about Bluesky coming from the Web3 world because I'm like attracted to this kind of decentralized, horizontal, ecosystem. Also, I had been like, crypto was like the wave of technology I came into, like that was like it was never my job, but it was like my interest, and kind of like got me started.
And provided tremendous promise for a new way of organizing, a new way of structuring, a new way of handling capital and investment and community fundraising and decisions. And, a lot of the Web3 world ended up being taken over by a bunch of scams and a bunch of things that disillusioned people. But it's important to remember there was a lot of sort of radical promise in there about new ways of working.
Even from my perspective, the way I looked at it was just like, I tell them very open about, I have like folks are saying you should go work for Bluesky. I'm like, I can't, I have a problem with authority. It's like that kind of, that there is no higher authority to take things from you or tell you how to do things. Like that was like that whole ecosystem spoke to me in that way. But then, yeah, obviously like it's taken quite a left turn. But yeah, so that's how I found out about Bluesky. And then this concept of like, could you take that, in my first experiment with Bluesky, I really, like I mentioned, I came into it as a dev. I signed up for the beta in February. I signed up for the beta. Yep. I think I got access in April, and now there's a Discord, there's an unofficial Discord, for the app proto devs. I think when I joined, there was a Matrix server, and I had never used Matrix before, but I'm in the Matrix server, and then I'm like, how can I get started? Like, where's the proto? I come from the Web3 world, so I'm like, where's the white paper? Where's the docs that I can get into it and build something? And it was like, it's not ready yet. And so, I was like, I was very, the way people talk about Bluesky now was how, that's why I'm kind of like, sometimes when people get to tweak it, I'm kind of like, oh, it's a little funny. Like I had your energy when I first signed up, and I stuck with it, and I kept pushing on it to be like, hey, like, where's the stuff that you said? Cause I saw algorithmic choice, fire. I saw moderation, choose your own moderator, fire. I've now since learned 2 years in that some people looked at App Protocol and Bluesky as like how folks look at like ActivityPub as like anti-corporate media. And yeah. I didn't look at it like that. My influences and thoughts come from like, Black folks always had their own magazines, their own TV stations. It's still corporate. It's still centralizing. It was never decentralized, but it was for us. And as long as there was tools, and people like approached like Black Twitter, right? Case in point, people there was no technology there. It was just a Black user base that influenced
it was a community created thing. Like it was all like Twitter, the company liked it and wanted to support it, but didn't make it and didn't do massive things to enable it. I was invited to this summit that Jeff Jarvis organized in New York with a whole bunch of prominent people from Black Twitter. This was right after Elon Musk took over. And there were a couple of us who were early Twitter people. Blaine Cook, who created OAuth, Tony Stubblebine, who's CEO of Medium, and a few other people in that room. And this was before Bluesky launched. And there were two things that really shocked me. Mostly I just sat there and listened. But there were a couple of questions. One was, how did it come this way? Where did it come from? And I explained the, open nature of it and the way it worked. And then there were a lot of really deep, profound frustrations with the way old Twitter had treated Black Twitter. Like the company had made this space, but was not effectively responding to the real needs of the Black community. And then the outcome of it was, there was a discussion about what should they do next. And there were a bunch of us who were there, including Jackie, who is a Black Fediverse developer. And the answer was just like, you need to build it yourself. You need to own it. You need to build it. It needs to be your technology. It needs to be your community control. And then you can have real accountability and you're not building on someone else's platform. And so at the time, people are like, that's really hard. And what I see you doing with Blacksky is fulfilling that dream, that sort of core idea that came out of the Black Twitter Summit, which is, okay, you're going to build it yourself. And you built the Blacksky algorithm so that people could choose a different kind of algorithm. And then you built the Blacksky moderation team. And so you can choose a Black community's owned and run and valued set of moderation tools, finally a set of self-governance and moderation tools that are not someone else's. You're not dependent on a well-meaning corporation or an antagonistic corporation or a nonprofit that isn't of and by your community. And I want to get into some of how that works and how you've been building it up. And then the thing that I think is really inspiring to people and they don't realize about Blacksky is you're doing the work to rebuild the entire Bluesky stack, the entire app protocol stack, so that if the company didn't do what you no longer dependent on some outside company. And like, just, talk about the work of that, talk about the vision, but also the work of building a community to create this.
Yeah, lots there. I'll say, so something I like to start with Blacksky is that like the goal and vision for Blacksky is, you can imagine Reddit, and Blacksky, the community, being one of those subreddits, the first subreddit, and hopefully making it so that other communities can spin up their own infrastructure, their own and it's like subreddits, but if the moderators could pay themselves and if they could actually, figure out whatever rules of the road that they want for their community, and Reddit can't come in and shut down that. They can't force you to do anything. Like if the moderators want to shut everything down, the moderators shut everything down. That's how it goes.
Yeah, Reddit ultimately has sort of veto power over its communities.
Yeah, and the communities have to agree to certain rules with Reddit. So we want to be able to provide ways for communities to spin up all this infrastructure on their own. The other thing, too, that I think we speak to specifically is curation and ownership. Like, I think there's arguments some folks make in the open social web, however we want to talk about this space, that like decentralization, like again, that kind of like escape from corporate control. And more so what I pitch to folks, because I know it speaks particularly to like Black folks, is ownership. The idea that we can, like, I would almost go out on a limb and say that I think I think that like a lot of folks in the space they like maybe have a technical understanding, but they don't align it to maybe like users, what folks would consider like product vision or user stories, or like an understanding of who those users are. And for me, I always had like a very clear set of people in mind, and those folks care about controlling your own destiny more than they care about like not being at the whim of some authority. Like the authority is actually okay if you trust the authority, and if there's ways to hold the authority accountable. And decentralization is in service to that, but it is not the end. Like there's like an additional thing needed there. And so a lot of what we've built is trying to make it so that it is like less top down. From the beginning, there's an ad. In the beginning, I was adding people manually to. So Blacksky, the way the mechanism for it is that, cause, I always point to folks that people find it like, folks say that sometimes there's this weird argument people make that like Blacksky is segregationist. And I'm always like, well, it started just as an algorithm. And for me, I could open up my Instagram Explorer page right now and it will be all Black folks. Do the same thing with TikTok. There's no world where I open, these apps and it's not that. And I don't know how do they know I'm Black? Like, that's like, sometimes there's these quite like things that people ask, but I'm like, for me, I'm just like, what if you just got rid of all that? What if you just showed the Black content? And then how do you determine that? Well, people opted in. So at its core, the feed is just a membership algorithm that it has moderation components built into it. It removes things. So for me, it's like a sculpture. It's like everyone puts in their pieces of clay, I guess, and it creates this big block. And then we take out some things to try to create an experience from it. So everyone said someone voluntarily has to use the hashtag #BlackSky tag. That adds them to a membership database on our side. And then we are pruning the feed for things that are like self-harm or we feel like it's off topic, things like that. So that's how the feed kind of started. Then we brought in moderators directly from the community. Like, we put a call out. It's like, hey, I'm going to do this. At first, we weren't the first moderation service. I sat back and watched how everyone else handled things. And then I saw what went wrong with some of the community moderation. And so that was like our way of doing things differently. It's like, we're going to pull people directly from Blacksky. Those will be the moderators. But
people who have the most context.
So we recruited folks directly from the community. I had a bad experience where the first moderator I brought on board burnt out, and that was very painful for me. And so for the folks that we've brought on since, we have a 7-person team now. All the moderators are recruited from the community, specifically Blacksky. They have an understanding of Blacksky, and they all have past experience with content moderation. So they know how traumatic the work is that they get. Because if you think about it, we have Black moderators moderating anti-Black content. So we've seen...
They put themselves in front of the worst.
Yeah. So, and it's like it hits different when it's like targeted towards your identity, because it feels like it always feels personal as you're doing the moderation. In addition to the violence and like racist rhetoric that you're encountering. We've scaled that up. At one point we were doing about 100 moderation reports per day, spread across the team. It's come down since November. Now it's probably about like 50 reports per day that we get. And another thing, a part of this that we find is that like, moderation decisions have a outsized impact on the experience of social media users. And ultimately, what happens on centralized services is that people get banned for things and there's really no recourse for them. There's no...
You don't have anyone to talk to. It's like computer says no. And you're like, but why? And what was going on? And where were the decisions? And what's the accountability? And like, who decided that? Even if it was the right decision, there's this unaccountability, which gets to the use of polis, which is these sort of digital direct bureaucracy tools. They come out of the participatory budget process in Brazil, where they said, well, how do we make a digital version of this? How do we make tools for communities of people online to debate stuff, to vote on it? And I think it's fascinating that you're using polis in the Blacksky community. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the way in which you're implementing that kind of democracy.
Yeah. So I think the best example right now is that we have a poll running for all of September that is for our community guidelines. So like Bluesky is updating their community guidelines. We just, with everything, the regulatory landscape is changing pretty rapidly around social media. I thought when I was doing Papertree, I was like, that's the regulated startup that I was going to be in finance. And like now social media is the regulated startup that I'm in, where we have to like navigate laws like Wyoming and Mississippi and stuff. We just rolled out our terms of service and privacy policy, which we just, went with the lawyers for to get that sorted. But for our community guidelines, we wanted to draft that actually with the community's input. Which I think makes a lot of sense. And
it's kind of obvious. It's in the name, and it's amazing that it's a radical concept.
Yeah. And so he basically was like, with Polis, you do a cool thing that you do is like you set a topic. And so we're like, help collaboratively create Black Skies community guidelines together. And then you can seed it with certain statements. So I tried to seed the original statements with, kind of the range of things that you would want to talk about: data retention, privacy, who's allowed in the Black Sky feed, who's allowed on the Black Sky servers. Even trying to get into some of the developer tooling stuff, like should someone need permission to be able to brand stuff too? So should someone need permission to use Black Sky in their name? Can you just start up a community and call yourself Black Sky? Which I was very surprised by the results of that one, where it was like people were very strongly against not allowing just anyone to use the name Black Sky. And then we're like, well, what if it's a sub community of Black Sky, like Black Sky gardeners? Should they be able to use it without permission? People are still like, no. So it's like the protectiveness over the brand of Black Sky and the community, like as a name, has been really striking to see and touching in a lot of ways. But yeah, so we've had folks weighing in the last week over that, and so far we've gotten 20,000 votes from 400 different people weighing in just on our community guidelines. So I'm very, very excited for this process and taking the findings from that and using that to draft our community guidelines. So we also have open one for our features for the app. How should the app work? Which is like a lot more. There's like less controversial features. So usually it's things that like folks are mostly in agreement, but it's also a cool way I find to like use is like, how should we actually also build the product? So we're trying to experiment with things like that too.
It sounds like you're engaging in a process of co-design with the community, where it's instead of an alienated company that maybe does user research or collects analytics, you're saying, if this is a community project, if this is, by and for the Black community, then it's not just a few developers or a few moderators, but a larger community of people that need to have access to participate in the real self-governance.
Yeah, there's several things that I wanted to hit on with that, which is like, one, I want to encourage more collectivist thinking and thought. Like, I think that's good. Some people say like Polis is like good for democracy. I think democracy is also good for feeling togetherness in a group of people. I've talked to you before that like my life's mission is to make mutual aid a normal, everyday, accepted practice in American culture. And so I think these collectivist opportunities, people talk about the town square all day. The closest thing we'd have to a town square in Brooklyn is a gathering place, of people to hang out together. It's not a place where you go and debate people you've never heard of and never met. You're not going to walk up and start yelling at someone, but you will, enjoy this collective experience together. So that's the kind of thing that more so that I want to foster. And then because I mentioned we want to create these other communities, I want to like start establishing these norms and create, and, we're basically building the tools as we, as this kind of like, these orgs emerge, it's like, oh, this is how we should govern things. We should use these tools to govern it. Because everything that we're doing is at a scale, right? Like, I think I talk about that in some of the presentations that I give, that like, sometimes when folks talk about online communities, they're thinking of like a couple hundred people. And then when you think about like the scale Bluesky wants to go to, which is like the Facebook scale social media platforms, these are billions of people. And I'm concerned with not a couple hundred size communities. I'm concerned with like tens of thousands, on the orders of millions of people. I think you can do that on the internet. And still have like a functioning community. I think that's what we've done. There's millions of people have viewed the Black Sky feeds at this point. Hundreds of thousands of folks are tuning in every month. Tens of thousands of people are posting. And so considering that as a community that can be governed and have its own rules. And that is like I think we did that with Black Sky, and then it's like, can we help other communities reach that point? And if you get to that point, if you just got a 10-person community, that's like a Google Meet you can have.
Yeah.
But
there's lots of things that work that, and the governance problems, sort of disappear behind the social relationships. Like you can deal with it. You can deal with it on a one-to-one social relationship instead of norming of it. But once you get into the internet scale of things, then that's not something we had. There was no way for everybody to get access to millions of other people. And so now that we have that, the question is, how do we govern that? How do we make that a space that reflects our values? And how do we not make it this weird shopping mall that feels like community open space but isn't, or just algorithms that make you feel like you're in a community? And the algorithms are useful, they're important, but where there's no accountability behind there's no space by which you have it. It's just like whoever's the best at manipulating the algorithm gets to control the direction of the community. And so what I see you doing with Black Sky is not like saying, okay, well, how do we govern that? And then the other part of it, which is so fascinating, is how do we make sure the incentives work? How do we make sure the economics work? How do you pay those moderators? How do you pay for the servers? If you don't build an economic system and a way of holding money, and a way of transferring it, and a way of doing community banking around it, then the platform and the space becomes very vulnerable, and it becomes victim of takeover.
Yes. So I think of like governance in like these three aspects of like infrastructure, kind of community relations, and then the finance piece. And so in the technology piece is like, that's where we have everything is open source, right? There's a story that we're trying to tell of like, we control our own destiny. We run our own relay that indexes all the millions of users' data every day. We run our own personal data server. You want to be under our terms of service, you can migrate over here. That also gives you a stake, right? Like if the server goes down, we're all going down together, like there's a very real solidarity in that. And so that's like how I think of it from like the infrastructure piece. All the stuff we're using is public. And so, if you're ever like, how does the Black Sky feed algorithm work? You can go look at it. And in theory, if you wanted to change it, you can open a PR. So that's the governance of the infrastructure. On the governance of the community, that's where it's like we use Polis. Sometimes, it is like you mentioned something earlier that like, sometimes organizing is messy. I think that messiness should be embraced in certain concepts. Like sometimes people take it too far. They're like, how do we prevent blackface? Do we have people upload their IDs and then we verify that they're black that way? And we're doing this like weird paper bag test. And there was like a little app that launched over the weekend that like, they said they were going to do that. They were doing this. It's not even going to say that. They're doing this weird thing. They're like, you upload your ID. We're going to verify they're black. We're going to save the ID on a hard drive so hackers can't get it. All this weird stuff, right? But so like, it's like, no, it's like, don't even think that hard. If you feel, for whatever reason, whether they are black or not, if they do not fit the guidelines of this community, report them. The moderators will handle it. And if they move to the server, that's even worse for them, because now you put us in a position where we could delete your account. So the incentives, you're really disincentivized. There's not a lot of upside to trolling Black Sky. And we've proven that out for 2 years. Like that's kind of what we cut our teeth on, building the tools to make it so that it is not, and that we innovated through that. We also gained a lot of trust through that. And then we like made it so that the next person that comes, like you have to, it just wouldn't make sense for you to do this. And then financially, that's the other piece. And so it's like thinking really hard of, I think I gained some gray hairs trying to think of like what type of organization Black Sky should be. I met with different people. I was like, I met with Nathan Schneider. Should we be a co-op? I met with a new social. Should we be a nonprofit? Like, I met with all these different people. And I was just like, well, we're Delaware C Corp, because I was just like,
Yep.
That's easy to do. And then also at the moment, the way we are structured, it is, it's the least strings and least things in the way to get stuff done. But very importantly, what is our business model and what is the vision that we pitch to people when they give us, when they invest in us, when they give us a grant? And I always want the business model to be aligned with the community. And so the way that we do that is, most of the money that we've gotten, I would say, counts as revenue through subscriptions from people subscribing. I think we get like a few $1,000s per month in subscriptions. There are people paying for social media, which is considered like a free product. And, but they contribute because they see the value. And I think the modern social media user knows that if you're not paying for the product, you are the product, right?
So it's the digital equivalent of tithing, so that you have that space, that community space that you want to give. And, we have to make the tools and the social dynamics and everything else that encourage people to do those subscriptions, those payments, contribute where they feel part of something. But we can do it. One of the things that I think is interesting is, with the way you're structuring Blacksky, if the company you have incorporated makes decisions that are radically unaligned with the community, the users have the ability to set up their own PDSs, their own like personal data servers that hold their username to account their data, their own relays, their own app views, their own moderator service. You've given the community all of the technology to hold yourself to account. Because if the company weren't bad, the community could fork itself and build a second set of tools on the open source technology you've released that continues to operate. And users can move their accounts within the Bluesky ecosystem, from a Bluesky server to a Blacksky server to their own server to a North Sky one if it's, they're part of the queer community, to an Arab Sky one if they want to be part of an Arab Sky, because you exist within this protocol ecosystem with these rights to exit interoperability, the structure of the company matters a bit less and more you have accountability that isn't just, listen to us.
Yeah. And I think I demonstrated that everything I build, that we create, has these like Ubuntu ethics to it, which is like, I am because you are, and I want for you what you want for me. So like, I'm never going to build anything that would put you at a disadvantage to the company. Like I'm building as if I'm the other user on the other end of it. You know what I'm saying? So if anything, there's stuff we build where sometimes to a funder or to an investor, it doesn't make sense. And I'm like, I make the pitch that it makes sense because community is our vehicle of growth. Like if you invest in the community and you trust them to invest back in you and grow with you, that is a moat. You know what I'm saying? So like giving people the keys to leave, like, hey, you can leave at any time. I tell people, you don't even have to. People sometimes ask me, what is your pitch to get people? I'm like, I'm not pitching anyone. You know what I'm saying? If anything, I'll try to talk you out of it. When I made a post that said, I made a joke. I was like, I'm giving out invite codes. I used the Oprah meme, giving out invite codes. Because a couple of my mods asked me for invite codes. And so it was just like an inside joke with the mods. And then people were like, invite codes? 300 replies asking for an invite code. And I was like, well, let me show you that you don't really want these invite codes, because you got to download Golang on your laptop. You got to open up the terminal. You got to use these things called environment variables. Like you have to install Homebrew if you're on Mac. Don't know what you do if you're on Windows. Sorry. You know what I'm saying? I made a whole 45-minute video walking people through the process, because I would be like, you're asking for these invite codes. First of all, let me just answer, to use the app we're building, the new Blacksky app that we're building, you won't even need these invite codes. So let's start there. So if that's all you wanted, close the video. If you still want these invite codes, watch the next 45 minutes in this grueling process. And people watched it. and they were like getting ready. They're like, I'm gonna do, and then someone came and built a tool, PDS Mover. Shout out Bailey Townsend. Someone within the Blacksky team built TechDite.cc. Shout out Clinton. Sharpie from the community. She went and made a tutorial video to explain to people that we're still using to this day. 300 like bookmarks and likes on Bluesky, and yeah, so it all kind of came together. But yeah, I'll talk people out of things first, because I'm like, you should only use and support us if you really need and believe in it. That's what we're here for. And I think, with the current events of this week, there's a lot of folks who feel like they need and believe in us, as opposed to Bluesky. And the great thing is we're having people ask us these questions like, if people are on different servers, how can I see them in my feed? Bluesky exists 30 million users, years later, and now people are asking those questions because that was never in the news.
That was the whole point. The whole
Mhm.
point was that we can make social media work like the web and like email and this thing where you don't have to be all on the same servers, but we needed to make this unified experience. And one of my worries in the way that Jay and Paul and Brian, the rest of the Bluesky team, they're great folks, but the way they were building it is my worry was that it would be so dominated by one company, one site, one thing to do it. And they couldn't build the alternative in the exit, but you're doing it. And so now we need to remind people that it might look like Twitter, but it's not.
Yeah, explaining that stuff is so fun. And then what's really great is if you get people, I don't know what the word for this is, but once you get people through the process on their own, they reinterpret it through their own words, and then they explain that to other people in ways that they get. And then it becomes just word of mouth growth. Like, I'm not out here, scrolling the feed, and then, today I did it because there's a big wave. And so like, I know there's a bunch of people asking, but in general, it's just people explaining to their friends like, hey, I moved. It was easy. And now that's a testimonial, because it sounds scary. It's like first of all, no one's done this before. No one's like, I'm going to move my server to another server, and then I can still use this app, and I keep my followers, and I can like use my own website domain as my handle if I want. It's like, and there's this other app. It's like, how does this all work? And so it's been really good. Just like being able to repost people, like the user testimonial. They're like, yeah, that was easy. Oh, this all makes sense now. Oh, I can explain this to other people. Cause yeah, we've had mothers of high school age children doing migrations on a school night, it's to the point where it's like, it's usable.
Yeah. You don't have to download Homebrew and build Go and set up all the configuration environment variables and everything else. Like, we finally built enough of the technology that normal people are empowered to control where they host their data, who they rely on to host their keys, who's giving their algorithms, who's giving their moderations, and leave that if they decide that they don't like that service, and how to fund it as a community project as opposed to, selling our attention just for advertising.
Yeah. And there was another piece there that I wanted to touch on, which is like the usability. Because at the top of this, I had mentioned like the kind of product-y view of how you can kind of approach some of these tools. And like I'd mentioned at the Atmosphere conference that like, people have kids, they don't need to worry about a PDS. But as it turns out, if you build the thing that makes it easy to understand first, if you can explain what a PDS is in a way that any human can understand. And then if you build the tools that make that even easier too, it's like, I'm saying? Like that, the problem, like it's a fundamental, it's believing that everyone can understand this. First of all, everyone can understand this and probably needs it. And then you just have to do the extra work to make it so that it is dead simple for them to use.
Yeah. And to be clear, like a PDS is the personal data server. This is the thing that holds your Bluesky or Blacksky content. It holds your keys, your accounts. It's connected to your name. And basically it's your own personal server that has all of your data, and you can choose who runs that. You can run it yourself. You can have Bluesky company run it. You can have Blacksky. You can have North Sky. You can have all these different people who can run it. And that means that your data isn't just sitting and being controlled on the Google Cloud like the way it is with Gmail. And so it's fundamentally about being able to give people control over it, but in a way that they can move from one to the other without losing everything. And that interoperability is amazing.
But again, with the language, like when you're going through the migration process, you move your records and your blobs, and like, what are those? Right. But so
it's like I've been very technical terms behind all of this stuff.
Yeah. It's like blobs. I have to explain. Blobs are just your media, your videos, there's some folks with a lot of blobs, there's some people who they migrated. They've taken up 12 gigabytes on the server.
Oh my God.
There's some outliers for sure. But yeah, it's been a very fun process to like have people be able to go through this and explain to people. And now, the other thing too is this has been really cool is that now that we also have the client set up, right? Blacksky.community, is people can just sign up and be a Blacksky user first before they're even a Bluesky user. Like that's also like, now there's a bunch of people doing that sign up flow. And we keep pushing all this stuff forward too. Like, like for the longest, PDSs could have multiple handles. Like you could have, for example, we now have on the Blacksky PDS, both blacksky.app as a handle and Blacksky Comrade is another handle. Cause we want to be able to like demonstrate that we can expand to these other communities and host all this stuff. And nothing is set up no one has set anything up in the protocol that accounts for the fact that available user domains on a PDS is a list, not a single field. And so we had to build that in the front end for both during the user sign up flow that you can choose your handle, and in the account settings flow when you change your handle that you have these multiple options, and then build that into the migration tools that we built so people can choose which they want as they migrate. And then like even talking with Brian from Bluesky about some of this, cause you're speaking to like the stuff that they didn't build, right? Or the things that they didn't build the PDS mover or TechDite, right? That's something they could have did. They made Goat, which is cool, that influenced those tools, but like and then even when some folks are building stuff, I love everything everyone's doing, but like, again, like you can't tell me that someone needs to go to GitHub and download the tool to use it. That's a non-starter. It's a non-starter. Like it has to be a web app, it has to work on mobile, ideally. And like there's just certain requirements of a kind of user, especially if you want billions of people, there are some like ways that you design your product and tools and talk about it to get those people. And there's another way that you do it where it completely shuts them off. And I'm really hyper focused on like, I want this to be for like, if everyone, not to be disrespectful, if everyone stays on Mastodon, who's on Mastodon, that's cool. I've always wanted my sister and my cousins on Blacksky. And so there's a certain way I got to design it for them. I go like, there's the mom test. My mom uses Blacksky. That's a huge success. My mom's and my mom, like, not super tech savvy, but like big Facebook user. Like a lot of people's parents. Big Facebook user. So understand social media, can get behind a new app, but it has to be accessible to folks in all kinds of ranges. And that goes for the dev tools too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the dev tools have to be accessible. The tools have to be accessible. I mean, I've done a bunch of work on the Nostr protocol, which is very similar to App Protocol. And there's unfortunately a community attitude there, which is just like, let's just teach everyone all these complicated things about public key cryptography and how servers work and how relays work and all this other stuff. And like, use technical terms, and that drives people away. And I don't think we get to everyone that way. So it's really reassuring sort of your thoughts around that. We've been talking for quite a while. I want to ask you, where do you see this is going? Like, what's your vision for Black Sky? What's your vision for the future of social media, for protocols? Where do you take this? What is your sort of medium-term vision and long-term dream for what you're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, I think from a tech product perspective, it's like I mentioned with like Reddit, but the subreddits actually control their destiny, can fund themselves, can make the decisions collaboratively, come up with their own governance rules with their platform, and no one can take those spaces from them. The political mindset that I come at it from is like, Huey Newton's intercommunalism, which is this idea that like, with the state of like America as this superpower, there aren't really other nations. They're just other communities. And those communities need to join forces together and be intercommunalists. And so I think of like, I've written about like an internet of autonomous communities. I want to see an internet of communities that run their own thing, fund their own thing, decide how that thing works, but are still connected to each other. And people have the freedom to leave. And, I really like the sci-fi example of the hives from Ada Palmer's To Like the Lightning kind of series where, a person becomes 18 and they choose which community they want to be a part of, which nation they want to be a part of. Like, and each nation has their own thing. I really like that. And then broader, like I do want, we're building these tools for social spaces so you can control your algorithm and your moderation tools. We're building the tools to try to help you govern that platform together with your community democratically. And then we really want to build out these payment rails. So we want to, we're having these conversations about building, we brought the Paper Tree team into Black Sky recently in these last couple months. And so we want to bring the Paper Tree experience of these communally pooled funds. The thing we're going to start with like, peer-to-peer payments, like a tipping functionality within Black Sky. Yeah. There's people
bringing that sort of Nostr Zap type thing of like little teeny micro payments between users into the Black Sky ecosystem.
Because people have been practicing mutual aid, like doing fundraisers on the platform since years ago. And so making that just like really just baked into the platform and I think that also legitimizes the practice, because sometimes people are like, well, what is this? Is this GoFundMe or is this a social app? And it's like, well,
yes,
it can be both. Yes. The social network, like money and social networks go together, like remittance between family members. There's, money can be the lifeblood of communities and the kind of environment that we and being able to like practice gifts and gift giving and sharing with people, I think is really important. But then we want to build in these kinds of like, if you imagine what DAOs try to do, I hate bringing up crypto because it's only certain people can maybe get that reference, or like co-ops, but like this idea where you control the algorithm, you control the moderation policies together, you have a governance mechanism for how you change those rules of how that algorithm and how those moderation policies work, and you have a collective pool of funds that you decide how that money gets doled out, who gets paid for moderation work. We pay our moderators already. But then it's like, how do we hire the next batch of moderators? How much do they get paid? Like, who can people get paid for like bug bounties for, or like doing technical work on the platform? Having this like pool of funds that then can be decided amongst the people of the community, a world where there's many of those, where there's many Black Skies.
And we've had some initial discussions about the technologies like Cashew, which provides the ability for communities of users to set up their own community mint, which is like a digital bank, which they can control and would work in the app protocol ecosystem, similar to the PDS and the Relay and the AppView, which is like, there are multiple of these things, and they provide the financial rails, and they provide the ability for people to raise money, hold money, and collect it, and share it. And if we think about this is not a new thing. Perdón, in the 19th century, the 19th century anarchists basically said what we need in order to engage a social change is cooperatives and mutual credit associations, creating our own currency, our own sets of money. That those exist today in sort of agricultural co-ops and credit unions in the US. But what's the digital version of that? And can we make the digital version of that controlled and held by these social media communities so that not only can we empower people to come off the streets or create new trends or run their small businesses, but we can fund the ecosystem from the participants and keep it controlled by the communities. To me, that is such a powerful dream of building a world in which we're dependent on each other. It's the mutual aid vision. We're not dependent on some outside institution, but we hold these things in common.
Yeah. This is not even a far off thing that there's folks today there's artist collectives today that they collaborate together, they pool funds together, they have a social media presence, they don't control the algorithms on those places. So if you imagine a world where, all right, boom, you can take your 10,000 person Instagram following, you could bring them over to App Protocol, you can direct them to artcollective.social, and the homepage of that, the main algorithm is just your art. So you can guarantee that people coming to your space on the internet are definitely seeing your art because you control the algorithm now. And they have other algorithms they can choose from. I mean, they can get their politics if they want. They don't have to move. They could be hosted on Bluesky and be logging into your app and using your stuff. Or they could feel hey, I want to be where they're at. I want to be closer. I want to have a artcollective.social handle. And then, as a part of that tool set is a way for them to distribute the funds that they're raising. Maybe they want to give out grants to their community. And that could all be baked into this platform that no one can take from them. And they run it themselves, and it's still connected with all these other parts of the internet. That's kind of that's at least in the short term. Those are the groups we're already having conversations with folks like that who have that interest.
Yeah, that's incredibly exciting. And it's so exciting, not just because of what it empowers, but because it prevents the ways in which things have gone wrong in the past. So much of what goes wrong is around the way in which the financial model, the advertisers and the incentives around the platforms and who owns them and where the payment processing things and all those things happen. That's where the traditional centralized platforms have been forced to shut people down. But if a community controls it and owns it themselves, then they're not going to face that conflict. And so to me, your project, the Blacksky project, is so much more than just a set of algorithms or moderations or a social media app for the Black community, but it's a model in which you're developing a future of social, political, economic, democratic activity that millions of communities can use all over the world. And that's really inspiring.
Hell yeah. Yeah, that's the vision.
I want to encourage everyone to check out Blacksky, follow Rudy, follow the work, contribute to the work. And I want to thank you for all of your work and the community which you've been part of. It's been really inspiring to get to know you over the last couple of years and see that work. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Rabble. Really appreciate it. Thanks for all your support.
Thanks again to Rudy Fraser for coming on Revolution.Social. Our intro and outro music is a remix of the Italian anti-fascist song Bella Ciao, courtesy of White Records.
This episode was edited and produced by Eric Johnson from lightningpod.fm. Our executive producer is me, Alice Chan, from Flock Marketing.
To learn more about the Social Media Bill of Rights and sign up for our email newsletter, visit Revolution.Social. You can find Blacksky at blackskyweb.xyz.
And for more interviews like this one, follow Revolution.Social on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Nostos, Fountain.fm, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And to paraphrase the Subcomandante Marcos of the Zapatistas, we need a social media revolution to make revolution possible. We'll be back next week. See you then.